Hi, this is Kendall Boyson, professional life and recovery coach, and you're listening to Encouragementology, the practice of instilling hope. Hi there. Thanks for joining me. On this show, we are taking a deeper look at stress in an attempt to find our way back to peace. No matter what your level of stress is, everyone can benefit from a more peaceful existence. Because life can sometimes feel like an endless juggling act. And let's be real, most of us are using bowling pins instead of tennis balls. Between the pressure to perform, the nagging feeling of not being good enough, and the constant stress of adulting, it's no wonder so many of us are stuck in a cycle of burnout. But here's the good news. There's a way to hit the pause button, reclaim your peace, and rewrite the narrative playing in your head. In this episode, we're diving into how to manage stress, tackle the relentless inner critic, and embrace the idea that you're not just enough, you're extraordinary. We'll explore why so many of us feel like we're falling short, unpack the serious toll this mindset takes on our health, and share practical, empowering strategies to help you flip the script. Because let's face it, you deserve to feel good about yourself, and that starts today. Ready? With peace being the ultimate destination, let's chart a course offering valuable pit stops along the way. Maybe you sometimes feel stress, but aren't sure that it's bad or that you suffer from too much stress. Maybe the word peace conjures up tie-dye and hip necklaces instead of a tranquil existence. Let's start with a few definitions to make sure we're all on the same page. Stress, a feeling of emotional strain and pressure that occurs when a person perceives an event as taxing or endangering their well-being. Peace, freedom from disturbance, tranquility. Okay, simple enough? Hardly. Stress has become a significant concern in modern society with profound impacts on health and well-being. Here are some striking statistics that highlight its seriousness. In the U.S., 77% of people report experiencing stress that affects their physical health, while 73% report stress impacting their mental health. Chronic stress is linked to numerous conditions like cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and of course, depression. Stress is a major workplace issue, with 83% of employees reporting work-related stress and over half saying it negatively impacts their productivity. Stress-related absenteeism costs employers billions annually. Anxiety is on the rise, with 43% of adults reporting feeling more anxious in 2024 than the year before. Many cite current events, financial issues, and safety concerns as primary triggers. Among teenagers and college students, stress is pervasive. Over 80% of college students report feeling frequent stress, often linked to academic performance, finances, and future planning. Chronic stress can shorten life expectancy by 2.8 years on average due to its impact on immune function, aging, and increased risk of diseases. I keep thinking, with all the modern conveniences we have today, why are we more stressed than ever? When I like to reflect on the past to see how the struggles of today compare, I envision the Ingalls family. I think about Pa on the prairie, loading up the wagon in harsh weather for a long trip to Mankato for supplies. How he takes the shotgun and tells Caroline he should be back in a week. But, oh, the uncertainty. It's not like she can track him with her GPS, or he can check in via text, or FaceTime her to ask which type of flower or fabric he should pick up. Now that's stressful. But we don't even have to go back to the 1860s to see the amplification of stress. At Healthline, I found why Americans are more stressed today than they were in the 1990s. We certainly live in stressful times, but how do they compare to how things were 3 decades ago? New research published examines the impact of stress on people who are middle-aged, finding a stark increase in day-to-day stress among people from 45 to 64 years old in the 2010s compared to the 1990s. In a new paper published in the Journal of American Psychologists, Penn State researchers looked at data from 1,499 adults collected in 1995 and then 782 different adults 17 years later in 2012. Both different groups had been interviewed on a daily basis for 8 straight days. They were asked about stressful experiences they had over the past 24 hours. The results? Researchers found that day-to-day stress and a sense of lower overall well-being were much higher in the 2010s compared to the 1990s. While people overall experienced about 2% more stress in the later decade, for middle-aged people, it was about 19% higher. Middle-aged participants in the survey showed a 17% increase in having a sense that stress would affect their future plans. They also had a 27% increase in the belief that their financial status would be affected by stress in the 2010s compared to the 1990s. Lead researcher Dr. David M. Almeida, professor of human development and family studies at Penn State College of Health and Human Development, told Healthline that at the onset, he and his colleagues expected life to be more stressful for people now compared to the 90s. What surprised them was this discrepancy between middle-aged people and other age groups. We thought that younger people in their late 20s and 30s would be the most stressed, with people coming out of an economic recession and low job prospects, entering economic uncertainty. But it was people about 50 to 64 who were the most stressed out. That stood out shockingly so. Almeida says that when they dug deeper in the data, it showed that people in their middle years seemed to have more demands and pressures placed on them, naturally elevating stress levels that might not be as existent for younger adults. For instance, people in midlife tend to be responsible for raising young adult children and getting them started in adulthood at the same time as taking care of older generations. It's a time of life when you're responsible not only for your own well-being, but the well-being of many people. Even at work, in midlife, you're entering management roles, and the sheer number of people you're involved with increases your opportunity to experience stress. Dr. Sudha Pritikanti, integrative psychiatrist and Ayurvedic practitioner at the University of California, San Francisco, says this is reflected in what she sees anecdotally with her own patients. Pritikanti, who wasn't affiliated with this new research, says she works with a lot of middle-aged women who take on a big brunt of these responsibilities and family duties. She says it's a pressing, defining issue that affects middle-aged women on a global scale, serving as something of a sandwich generation, stuck between taking care of aging parents and the labor of nurturing teens and young adults. Women in this age group also have to care for grandchildren as well, something exacerbated by the fact that post-Great Recession economic hardships forcing young adults to move back home, creating difficult-to-manage multi-generational households. This is certainly a new reality that existed more over the past decade than in the 1990s, a time of overall economic prosperity in the United States. It's important to note that in many ways, this is a very U.S.-centric stress driver, given that many non-Western cultures embrace older adults as sources of wisdom and respect. Pritikanti told Healthline that our cultural de-emphasis on people as they gradually get older also places a psychological stress of its own, a very American problem that doesn't seem to be abating anytime soon. being said, didn't a lot of the problems that plague our modern day exist 30 years ago? Like lopsided economic distributions between rich and poor, domestic and global political upheavals and controversies, the demands of work and family? Almeida says stress and anxiety are nothing new, but unique shifts in technology and the way we relate to the world over the course of 3 decades has had a psychological impact. The recession on its own changed the face of many people's livelihoods that wasn't present during the economic booms of the 90s, but also our access to information, connecting with people all the time, has fed stress. In the 90s, the internet did keep people connected, but not to the extent that it would 20 years later. I think constant connection to information can be great in some ways, but never gives you a break. This is especially true with the work-from-home culture brought about by modern technology. Increasingly more people have been bringing work laptops and projects home with them at the end of the day. All too many of us are familiar with the drill, checking emails before bed, looking at the news at all hours due to smartphones and social media. This information access may have a big stressful effect, says Almeida. There certainly has been a lot of upheaval in the recent years to make it not seem surprisingly that the 1990s were less stress-inducing than the 2010s. Last year, the American Psychological Association released its Stress in America report, showing that the 2020 presidential election, healthcare, and fears of mass shootings were big drivers of national stress across the board. With the economic recession, people were losing jobs and getting laid off. So there was also the whole added challenge of getting retrained in the same or new field, getting used to computer technology in a new way. Pretty Conti explains that this was harder for middle-aged and older people, with many of their younger counterparts born into the reality that always had computers and social media. For younger adults, it was easier to adopt to these new technological shifts, even during a stressful time. One big irony, of course, is many of the people who were in their middle years by the 2010s were some of the first adopters and inventors of the internet in its earlier incarnations. It was hard for many to adapt and grow with it, says Pretty Conti. Increasing numbers of divorce and separation could be another big factor in the stress shift over time. While divorce was certainly common in the 1990s, it's even more so now, with some people hitting the edge of their middle years and looking into their older adulthood without a life partner. A realization that can be disorienting for someone who might never have contemplated the idea of growing old independently when they first got married or partnered 20 or 30 years ago. This is a phenomenon that also acutely affects women. Pretty Conti states, a lot of the women I've worked with who divorced or are divorcing later in life took out significant amounts of time earlier in their career to raise families. Now they're not in a place where they have the economic security that they had earlier in life. This financial stress of divorce and making up for lost time in some ways in terms of their careers presents a double stress they're also dealing with. Someone looking at starting over at 60 is dealing with the stress of feeling they have fewer years to make up for financial and emotional losses than that of a 30-year-old. So now that we understand where the stress comes from, how can we find our way back to peace? Pretty Conti says she recommends a holistic approach. Traditional therapy can help coupled with outlets like acupuncture, exercise, a nutritious diet, and yoga. The more our lives center around technology and the more we keep getting work done without being with people, there is some danger in being in this situation where you lack human contact, which I think makes it more difficult to deal with stress. He's always been interested in how stress is tied to physical and psychological health, but is particularly looking forward to examining one topic that sounds counterintuitive: the positive impacts of stress. Almeida is interested in the idea that when people are stressed, they're actually more likely to seek support and problem solve. When it comes to the complexities of middle age, Pretty Conti says that no matter the era, there will always be some enduring existential qualms that drive stress. People tend to look back and think, did I make the right choices? That is something that comes with the territory of middle age, of being 55 or something and thinking, wow, I've lived more years behind me than are in front of me. That's a sobering thought and sometimes motivates people to make significant change in a positive direction. One of the things I'm practicing today is based on the idea that just because I can doesn't mean I should. I can do many, many things. In fact, I have never thought there was anything I couldn't do. Well, except sing on key. No matter how much I try, I know, joyful noise and all, blah, blah, blah. To avoid taking on too much and overloading myself and losing what little free time I have, I make a conscious effort to prioritize. I focus on what truly needs my attention, what genuinely brings me joy, and what I might be saying yes to simply because I struggle to say no. The other side of the coin is this feeling of not doing enough or not being good enough. I can't tell you the number of people I've spoken to who are stressed and unhappy with how far they've come and how far behind they see themselves. The feeling of not measuring up can significantly contribute to stress levels. Studies reveal that 65% of people struggle with self-esteem and the belief that they are not good enough, often impacting their mental health and increasing stress. These feelings are linked to workplace pressure, social comparisons, and internalized perfectionism, leading many to feel overwhelmed and undervalued. This sense of inadequacy can create a cycle of stress, reducing productivity and self-confidence while amplifying mental health challenges. For instance, nearly 40% of employees identify performance worries as a major stressor, underscoring how perception of self-worth impacts well-being. Kara M. Newman helps us understand what to do when you never feel good enough, found on Greater Good. Are you a good enough friend, employee, partner, or parent? Are you thin, attractive, smart, and nice enough? If you have doubts about yourself, you're not alone. In fact, clinical psychologist Ronald D. Siegel has heard this from many of his clients he's worked with for over nearly 40 years and grappled with them himself despite being an assistant professor at Harvard Medical School. I noticed that there was one painful struggle almost everyone seemed to share: the relentless quest to feel better about themselves. He writes in his new book, The Extraordinary Gift of Being Ordinary. In fact, most of us go about our days with self-evaluative thoughts rattling through our brains, concerns about our performance at work, disappointment about what we see in the mirror, judgments of our lovability based on the last conversation we had. Even when we feel good about ourselves, that feeling is fragile, ready to be shattered by the next blow to our self-image. Instead of this self-referential chatter, Siegel suggests another way of being based on connecting with others rather than proving ourselves to them. His book offers tips for working with the feelings of not good enough and building a stable sense of happiness. Although constantly evaluating our worth is exhausting, it's also very human. The propensity to evaluate ourselves and compare ourselves to others, which was once useful for survival, is actually hardwired into the human brain. To win the evolutionary race and reproduce, early humans had to compete with others for status. Comparing ourselves to others, now an unfortunate side effect of social media, was once a survival skill. And being exiled from the tribe was a matter of life and death, so fears of rejection linger. Concerns about our adequacy can take different forms in each person. Maybe you want to feel special and get good grades or be attractive and make more money. Maybe you just want to be liked and have enough friends. Or maybe what's important to you is feeling educated, creative, and talented enough. In response to these feelings, we try to do everything we can to prove to ourselves and others that we are these things: good, generous, strong, successful, sexy. But that doesn't work either. It's actually our relentless trying to feel good about ourselves that causes much of our distress. For example, research suggests that people who pursue external rewards like fame, power, wealth, and beauty in order to be popular are more anxious, depressed, and discontent compared to those who are focused on personal growth, relationships, and helping others. When our goals are external like that, we may find ourselves falling short all the time. There are always people doing better, so we can feel constantly judged. And if we ever hit a goal we had set for ourselves, we often just raise the bar again. Always performing, we rarely get a break to feel content or at peace. A preoccupation with being good enough can also get in the way of connecting with others. When we perceive any kind of criticism from friends or coworkers, we may feel threatened and get defensive. Then our habit of self-judgment can spill over into harshly judging others, which, surprise, surprise, people don't really appreciate. And if we constantly feel insecure, we might try too hard to be liked or be too afraid to put ourselves out there in the first place. Over the years, all those times when we felt not good enough become a pool of accumulated sadness, hurt, and shame that can be triggered by things that happen in our daily lives. That weight is hard to carry. Just think of how wonderful a day would be without worrying so much about how well you're doing and what others think of you. Instead, simply enjoying life. Instead of trying to do more so we can finally feel worthy, the solution lies in shifting the focus altogether from self to others. That means building our relationships and practicing skills like compassion, gratitude, and forgiveness. In any given interaction, that means focusing on connecting rather than impressing. You can also tackle your feelings of shame directly. As researcher Brené Brown has pointed out, shame thrives in secrecy. And Siegel encourages readers to share their imperfections and foibles with others. More often than not, you'll find that you're not alone, and we all have aspects of ourselves that we are less than proud of. He also suggests having a bit of dialogue with your inner critic, asking them, what are you afraid would happen if you weren't doing such a good job criticizing me? Then you can turn to the wounded, insecure parts of yourself and ask, what might you need right now? The goal, according to Siegel, is to develop unconditional self-acceptance, an attitude similar to what you'd get from a good parent. I love you no matter what. That doesn't mean we don't hold ourselves to certain standards or feel disappointed when we fall short of them, but our missteps don't damage our value as human beings. We can work to develop this feeling of acceptance whether or not we behave intelligently, correctly, or competently, and whether or not others respect, love, or approve of our behavior, separating our evaluation of our abilities and behaviors from the sense of meaning or worth. That's easier said than done, of course. One way to move toward this kind of self-acceptance is to realize that your self-standards may not be ones you choose in the first place. You may have unconsciously drifted from your core values as you move through the world and were exposed to the opinions of others. For example, what do you think makes someone good and worthy? And where do you think those beliefs come from? What are the arbitrary rules that you expect yourself to follow? In a world of immediate gratification, just remember, the body is amazing and contains natural resources you can tap into for relief in the short and the long term. Self-regulation tools can be divided into quick fixes for immediate relief and long-term health practices for sustained well-being. Let's make sure we cover those. So a quick fix is excellent for acute stress or when you just need some fast relief. Long-term practices create a buffer against future stress and support sustained emotional balance. It's what we should all be looking for. Integration. Use quick fixes during high-stress moments while building long-term habits for resilience. So we're going to go through some of these because if you feel like everything that you use in your toolbox is just for a quick fix, then you're always going to be looking for the quick fix. You're not developing that lifelong term practice. So again, quick fixes, these are tools you can use in the moment to calm your stress or regain your focus. While effective for immediate needs, they don't address the underlying causes of dysregulation. So let's go through some of these. Number 1, deep breathing, right? Take 4 to 5 deep breaths, inhaling for a count of 4, holding for 4, and then exhaling for a count of 4. This is a quick relaxation for the nervous system. It will also activate that vagus nerve. If you don't know about the vagus nerve, definitely check into that because if you feel your heart racing and you're starting to get anxious, taking those breaths will actually activate that vagus nerve and it will send those impulses to your brain and to your body, to your heart, calming yourself down. Number 2, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, grounding technique. Now, this is different than Mel Robbins' 5-second rule, which would be 5 seconds to act on an impulse. This is different. So identify 5 things you see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, and 1 you can taste. This activity, almost like game-like, redirects focus and alleviates anxiety. It also, by the way, gives you enough time to kind of, repace yourself before you act on impulse. Number 3, progressive muscle relaxation. Tense and release muscle groups from head to toe. This is a great way to isolate muscles. And so you may not even know they're tense until you cause yourself to look to tense up just that muscle. Then you might say, oh my goodness, my shoulders are already tight. Well, now I can release that. It relieves physical tension caused by stress. Number 4, short walk or movement break. A brisk 5 to 10 minute walk outside or light stretching. This can really boost your mood by releasing endorphins and clearing your mind. Plus, you're probably sitting at a computer. Take a break. Leave your phone at home. You don't always have to have noise in your ear. Go out and listen to nature. Number 5, journaling for 5 minutes. Okay, I've always said this doesn't mean diary, okay? So don't feel bad if you're using journaling as a short-term fix and you're not doing it every day as a long-term practice, okay? So this means writing down some of your thoughts or worries, just getting them on paper so that you can see them. This can provide mental clarity and emotional relief. Number 6, mindful distraction. Engage in a quick, enjoyable activity like a puzzle or music. Get up and do a dance. Maybe make yourself something to drink or something that just sort of gives your mind a distraction. It offers temporary relief by shifting attention. I would say fold the clothes that are obviously sitting in the dryer, but that's just me. Okay. Moving on to long-term health practices. These build resilience and create a foundation for improved self-regulation over time. So, of course, we're going to start with mindful meditation. There are so many apps out there that you can use to help you here. I know my mind races all the time, and to sit there and commit to 10 to 20 minutes a day to cultivate present moment awareness sounds impossible. But don't you like a challenge? This will help you reduce stress and improve emotional regulation. If you are prayerful, hey, combine the two. Prayer is meditation. So make it your meditating, prayerful moment. Number 2, exercise routine. Regular aerobic activity like walking, cycling, dancing. Do something like that 3 to 5 times a week. This is going to strengthen your mind-body connection and release stress-reducing chemicals. Now, I know that I've never had a runner's high, and I hear people that go do CrossFit and they say, oh my gosh, I mentally can't handle life if I don't do CrossFit. I've never experienced that ever. But I will tell you that just a little aerobic exercise in the morning really gives you motivation for the rest of the day. Number 3, sleep hygiene. Prioritize 7 to 8 hours of quality sleep with a consistent bedtime routine. What does that look like? That doesn't mean looking at your phone like 2 seconds before you shut it off and go to bed. It means winding down. This world is so busy. Your brain needs a chance to decompress and unwind. This will regulate mood, energy, and cognitive function. You know, so many people say, oh, I only need about an hour or 2 of sleep. That's not humanly possible, okay? Your body is suffering somewhere. So maybe it's you can't sleep because you have too much going on. Start unpacking that so that you can get a few more hours of good sleep. Number 4, healthy nutrition. Focus on a balanced diet with whole foods, reducing caffeine and sugar. Supports mental clarity and stable energy levels. Listen, we can all do a healthier diet. I say all, but I am learning so much about food and what's in it. And I just heard a podcast the other day that said, if you read the ingredients and you wouldn't put that on your counter and use it every day, don't eat it. So this is giving me a whole new idea of what healthy nutrition really looks like. Number 5, therapeutic practices. Engage in regular therapy, counseling, or just self-reflection exercises. It may be important to share what's in your brain. So many of us kind of just keep it all upstairs and we don't express it. We don't talk about it. We don't bounce it off of other people. And left to our own cognition, sometimes those thoughts can get escalated, elevated, grandiose. So whether that's in a support group style setting or just with one other person, it's important. It helps you address root causes of stress and emotional dysregulation. Number 6, regular gratitude practice. It is so important. Don't let it just be on a t-shirt or on a coffee mug. Write down 3 things you're grateful for daily. I do this, I've mentioned it before, but I do this with a group of 3 other women, and we're on a group text. And every day is difficult. Sometimes you don't feel grateful, but it's important to shift your perspective because it helps you foster resilience. It's important. Be grateful. 7, learning emotional regulation skills. There are many tools out there like cognitive reframing, which help you manage triggers and stress more effectively. Research those. You don't even have to know what you're looking for. You just have to know what you're dealing with. And then you can find some ideas, some ways to connect with some tools that can really, really help with the regulation. You know, many people interchange the concepts of worry, fear, stress, and anxiety, lumping them all up together. But there are differences that we really need to explore. On Therapy in a Nutshell's YouTube channel, I found stress, anxiety, and worry. It's going to lay it all out for us. Take a listen.
What's the difference between stress, anxiety, and worry, and why does it matter? Most people talk about stress, anxiety, and worry interchangeably, as if they're the same thing. For example, my test really stressed me out. I was so worried about it. Or, I'm so worried about this upcoming performance that it's making my stomach hurt. Now, the lack of differentiation between these different aspects of anxiety leads to difficulties in knowing how to resolve the effects of them. So today, we're going to talk about the difference and why it matters. So, worry is the thinking part of anxiety. It happens in our frontal lobes, the part of our brain that plans and thinks and uses words, and it has to do with thoughts like, is she mad at me? Or what's going to happen at my upcoming performance? Now, we humans have developed this part of our brain for important reasons. Worry helps us solve complex problems by thinking about them, perhaps over and over again. But if worry becomes distorted, compulsive, or stuck into a repetitive cycle, then we can develop disorders like depression and anxiety. Now, stress, on the other hand, is the physiological response to fear. So it's what's going on inside of our bodies when we're reacting to something that's perceived as threatening or dangerous. It's the fight, flight, freeze response and is rooted in the reptilian brain. Now, it's instinctual and unconscious. Stress serves a perfect function in helping us to escape real threats. For example, the sweating that comes along with stress helps us stay cool, or the adrenaline helps us perform in situations where we have to run away or fight off a physical threat. However, if stress becomes chronic and remains unresolved, it can have serious consequences in our bodies. High blood pressure, heart disease, cancer, and chronic illness are all associated with stress. Anxiety is the intersection of these two reactions, the thinking and the biological response. It's rooted in the limbic system, and it has to do with this feeling of foreboding or dread, like something bad is going to happen. Anxiety helps people be watchful for danger, but if it dominates our lives, it can make it hard for us to feel joy and to move forward in the direction of our values. If we want to learn to manage our anxiety, we need to learn to tailor our interventions to the different aspects of stress. So in order to manage our worry, we need to target those thoughts with cognitive interventions, changing how we think and changing what we're constantly imagining and visualizing in our minds. And if we want to change the stress response, we need to take a bottom-up approach, incorporating our body's reactions and responses into interventions that change those reactions and responses into a healthy way. The first step of emotion management is awareness. Start to pay attention to what it feels like when you're having an anxious response. Is it rooted in your mind? Are you having thoughts or imagining some future catastrophe? Or is it rooted in your body? Are you having these physiological reactions like an upset stomach or sweaty hands? And as you start to pay more attention to these reactions and gain more awareness around them, you'll develop greater ability to learn how to respond to these instinctual reactions in a more helpful way. See if you can distinguish between the two aspects of anxiety, the worry and the stress. Maybe even spend some time writing about it.
If you want to share encouragementology with a friend who needs to know they're not alone in this journey of self-discovery, you can visit encouragementology.com or anywhere you stream your content to receive this episode and all others. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram for additional encouragement throughout the week. So I challenge you, start small. Identify one stressor in your life and address it with a calming technique like deep breathing or reframing your thoughts. Then, commit to taking one small step toward asking for support or setting a boundary, because your peace is worth protecting. I know you can do it. Thank you for listening to Encouragementology with Kendall Boyson, where we find positive ways to handle some of life's challenges.
I stumbled through until the path was clear. That's when I found you and how I wound up here.